And good morning, everybody. We're alive. Congratulations. You've made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, all the things that we know and love that make our lives better. And if you're doing your job correctly, you're not getting credit for it. But Austin and I, we know what you're up to and we appreciate it. So thank you very much. If you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a chair. My name is Brian Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we get on and we do the Food Safety Chat live, and I get to bring an amazing guest on the chat to talk about all things food safety with you. And we're getting kind of a weird feedback here on my side. I don't know if we're putting that or not. So yeah, beautiful. There it stopped. Oh, much better, much better. So one of the things that we love to do here on the chat as we start out is we list out where in the world we're at. So I'm in Loveland, Colorado, and Austin, who is the automated hygiene expert at Meritech, is not at home. So where are you at today?
I am about 2 hours west of Denver, where I live, out in a little town called Woodland Park. So my wife and I have a cabin out here to do a little staycation, do a little creative retreat. She's working on some music. I'm going to work on some writing, and yeah. Just rented this cozy little cabin here, and
look at puppy. Hello,
my little man right there. But yeah, it's a great setup. And I've got my writing station set up and ready to go. So be writing a story about a World War II event that I went to last weekend. So figured it was appropriate to bust out the 1928 Corona typewriter to...
Nice. So when you use it, do you kind of speak in like a 1930s movie type voice? Like, hey, honey, leave me up some coffee. Tim, let's get up, yeah.
I got a breaking story.
Come on, yeah. That's too awesome. So good morning, everyone. Sean, Jose, good to see Jose, Michelle, of course, Ryan, and Tim. So Tim's going through a bit of a rough spot right now that he had posted on LinkedIn. So we're all thinking about you, Tim. So hopefully you get through that well. So let's see. Let's jump into stuff. I was talking with Austin before we got started. Normally what we do with the chat is on Mondays, we put together the show notes of what we want to talk about. And then part of my ritual is before the show, I'll kind of highlight little key things on the notes for that day of what we're talking about. And I was showing Austin before, pretty much everything on here is highlighted. That's how much stuff we got to talk about today. It's going to be, I think, a very important topic. But before we dive in for that, let's join everyone for a drink of your favorite beverage, please. Cheers. Yeah.
What you got this morning?
Just my normal Nespresso coffee, which is getting pretty expensive, so it's kind of a treat every now and then to have the Nespresso.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. So before we dive into our topic for today, Austin, you ready for the dad joke?
As ready as I'm gonna be.
So hopefully I won't be coughing or anything here on the chat. I've been a little under the weather, Austin, but it's been weird because it seems I only get sick on the weekdays, but I think I've figured out why.
Why is that?
I think I have a weekend immune system. Weekend immune system. Yes, I said it.
I said I did it.
I said I was going to do it, and I did it. So Austin, of course, worked with Meritech, and he's got the Meritech blue on. I see there, which is nice. So, what in your world, what have you been up to?
Man, a whole lot. Some interesting changes. You know, Meritech's been around for 30 years, and we were recently acquired by CFS, which is Lafferty. So Lafferty and Knight and Lavo. So the two of those brands probably might not be that familiar to the food industry. Knight Labo. But yeah, CFS is kind of the overarching umbrella company. And so now we're not only doing automated hand washing and, boot sanitizing, but now we're doing door foamers and sanitizing equipment for machinery. So big change for us. So we just grew massively.
The company, it kind of sounds like a law firm.
CFS?
Yeah, it's like, all these different,
I know. Yeah. And, but it's awesome because there's so many, I go out and I walk plants a lot to, assess kind of hygiene needs for, hand washing and boot sanitation. And so often I get the question around like, oh, do you do door foamers? That came up constantly. And I was always like, no, we don't have that. So I'm excited to get that into the portfolio to be able to start offering that. And then just learning, they have Lafferty has a pretty large catalog. So learning all the equipment that they have and the specific uses for it. And then, doing what I normally do, just traveling around a lot just to go visit plants. So I was up in Minnesota last a couple of weeks ago and heading back out to the West Coast next week. So it's been an adventure like always.
Nice. Very good. And that's good because I love what the company is doing at Meritech because, part of that is having that whole package and being able to work with your clients and give them, an understanding of everything that they need in this particular space. And your expertise is really super valuable for sure. But what's cool and what I think you bring to the table as well, Austin, I'm probably embarrassing you a little bit, but it's that, and this is how we met, is it's that persuasion, psychology, people side of things too, of what it is you do. But there's an important piece on this as well, which gets into our topic for this week, which is just because you're doing something, that also implies that you're not doing something. So there's a couple things around that we wanted to talk about here today. And there's a phrase that pops up, and Scott Adams used to talk about this, is sometimes, and this definitely applies in quality and food safety, is you have to pay attention to the dog not barking. So sometimes things aren't there that should be there. So as an example, you're walking out in the plant and there's a noise you normally hear. And all of a sudden that noise isn't there anymore. It's like, oh, what? Yeah. Something's different. And just a lot of times that change is negative instead of positive. And if the dog isn't barking, you'll see this in like horror movies, right? Where they're out tromping around in the woods and you hear the birds and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it goes dead silent. It's like everybody in the audience knows, oh, something's coming. Right? And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. And I think more formal way to talk about this is lost opportunity. What's the lost opportunity cost of this? And with that, and with Jose on here, he'll probably laugh when I do this, but it's always very important to start with definition. So how would you define lost opportunity from your viewpoint?
Oh man, kind of sprung that one on me. For lost opportunity, it's what I see so often, especially with dealing in quality and safety. Is there's not time to plan for the future or to think about what if we could prevent these things from happening, right? It's firefighting. And so when I'm constantly fighting fires and staying on top of just what is right in front of me, that I lose the chance to develop opportunities, right? Because now I'm just kind of like, I'm at the mercy of what's happening on a day-to-day basis, from, my water pH to whether my, a machine is down, to which employee didn't come in this day. So by strictly focusing on that, then I don't have that chance to develop opportunities.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a great definition. I looked one up here online and it was, so the value of the best alternative you give up when you choose one option over other. So there's only so many hours in the day, in the week. I don't care if you're a crazy maniac working 100 hours a week. there's only so much time. And there's only so many things you can work on. And if you run around, to your point, Austin, fighting fires, nothing else gets done. And you'll see this in plants. I'm sure you see this all the time. Is you go into the plant, it's a constant state of chaos. They devolve down into that firefighting. That's all everybody does all day long. They wait for pieces of equipment to break, and then the maintenance guys run over it, et cetera, et cetera. When I worked for French companies, Beaugrand had a very good methodology in their quality reports, in their cost of non-quality calculations. And they went to the nth degree, and I learned a lot from them. And part of it is they would calculate if you're making out-of-spec product. Okay, great, you're losing that, and everybody kind of understands that. But you're also losing the sales. You're losing line time, because now you have to go and recreate that product again, which means you have to make it twice, right? So you've now lost that line time as well. So they did a really good job of calculating CNQs and figuring out what those lost opportunities were. And this is super important in quality, because just like everything else in life, it's all about choices. And in food safety, we have to learn, and I think that we can all get better at this, I know I can, is that we have to focus on what is important over what is urgent. And this will kind of bubble up in the different phrases that we hear in quality, right? Is lack of planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on mine. Well, that's fine, and people are going to roll their eyes at you, but guess what? You still end up doing it, don't you?
It's true.
Jay always has great comments here as well, too. This one's probably too long to put up on the screen, but he's referencing the Eisenhower matrix of how to look at decisions. And we've all looked at, Ben Franklin's decision-making process, et cetera. These things are all very important. And as we're diving into this topic, I'm reminded of a quality manager who used to work for me. His name was Maurice Pennock, and we called him Moss. And he was a super intelligent guy. And he worked at my plant at White Wave in Bridgeton, New Jersey. And every time I would come into that plant, he was crawling around on production equipment, all kinds of stuff, because he knew more about the equipment than the maintenance guys. So one time I came in and he's on top of a filler, changing out the Paul filters, and the maintenance guys were watching him do it. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, well, it's just easier if I, right? We all got caught in that trap. It's just easier if I do it. Yep. I'm like, dude, no. The plant doesn't get better with the maintenance managers sitting watching you do that shit. You need to be, to your point, Austin, thinking. I want to come into this plant when you don't know I'm coming. I want to find you sitting at your desk thinking about things. That's why the quality manager is there. They're there to make the plant better, not maintain the plant. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that, this gets back to the world of leadership development that I came from, which is, seeing how quality and safety managers are trained moving into their position, because I think so often there's not really that training to put them into that position, to prepare them for that role, right? It's they were good at this job, therefore now the punishment for being really good at your job is that you get promoted into a management position. But now there's, like you said, it's if you don't have these tools at your disposal, or you haven't been taught these things and learn how to do it, then yeah, of course the natural gut reaction for all of us is like, just keep things afloat. And that's my job, is that I keep things afloat. And that becomes like the actual mentality, is that's like the sense of pride, is that I keep things afloat whenever the whole.
Yeah, you get sucked into that vortex. And that's exactly the reason why, sitting back here, that's why I wrote my book, because we're not trained to be managers. And the other point to pull out of that as well is you never inherit something brand new. People have been there before. And there's already systems in place. There's already things being done. Part of this is sitting back and saying, why are we doing that? And a lot of times people don't know. It's like that old saying, it's a meme you see on LinkedIn every now and then, where there's a lady making Thanksgiving with a ham. Have you heard this one?
Oh, and fitting it in the pan?
Yeah. So she would chop the end off the ham. And the daughter sees mom doing that. And you're like, why do you do that? She's like, I don't know. My mom always did it. And so they went and asked grandma. So grandma, why do you cut the end off the ham before you put it in the oven? And grandma laughed and said, that's because I had a really small oven and it wouldn't fit. But that legacy continues on. And what I found over the years so I ran quality assurance at 5 different companies. And that was one of the first things I would do is, number one, never go into a company and start upsetting the apple cart. Your job is to figure out what's going on. How does this company operate? Every company is unique. But after 90 plus days or so, then you can start really challenging things once you understand why they do things. And then start trimming things. And what I found was, as a general rule, when I would look at the quality systems within the company at corporate and the plants, Austin, I was able to take out about 60% of their processes because they were non-value added or they were duplicated. And man, would people fight me on that. Well, this is how we do it, right? And it's like, well, what if I can make your life easier? Oh, well, okay, well, I'll listen a little bit.
I mean, I have that conversation constantly whenever I go into a facility and see them using, tons of dry quat throughout the facility. And I start, introducing some of the different products that we have around, sanitizing shoes. And they're like, I've been using dry quat for 30 years. It's, I know it, it's safe. It is, even though it's like, hey, I might be able to save 30, 40, 50% on your spend. There's that reluctance to change because it's like, well, I know this and it's, we haven't had a recall using this. So therefore the conclusion is that the dry quat is preventing us from having a recall. So there's a lot of that, those psychological barriers when we get really used to something, and I'm guilty of the same thing. I don't want to change my processes, like even coming out to this cabin, like I brought my whole coffee setup because there's a certain way I like to make my coffee, and I've got my little scale and my grinder and, my pour over. And so it's like, I'm not going to change that for the weekend. I'm going to just haul that crap out with me.
And yeah, we're creatures of habit. There's a ritual, right? And that's why when I designed the food safety chat, as it evolved over time, I built these rituals in, right? Of, okay, here's, say hi to everyone, ask everyone where they are, coffee, dad joke. It becomes part of your routine. And routine is a good thing in a lot of different ways because it allows you to automate processes. Imagine we all keep our toothbrush in the same spot because that's part of our morning routine. Imagine if you had to go and search for your toothbrush every morning. Like, where did I leave my toothbrush? And you're looking in the closet and your car and all. It's going to take you a half hour to find your toothbrush. When if you know where it is, that makes things easier. So routine is good in a lot of different ways. But as we're discussing here, as Sean eloquently stated, is status quo just puts you in jeopardy, right? Because it's that phrase that we hate in quality. That we've always done it that way. Why? Well,
and it's, and so much of human nature is reducing, caloric burn in our brain, right? We look at, well, what will require the least amount of calories to solve this problem. And that's part of our evolution and why we are, our frontal lobe is as advanced as it is. And so that means finding ways to create these processes and take these tasks off of our plate that we might not, need to be spending the time and the energy doing it, and that ties into automation, and so much of automation is about removing these issues that we don't really need to worry about anymore. I don't want to shamelessly plug, the company, but automated hand washing removes that concern, right? And so if I can go in and say, hey, we can put the automated hand washing systems in here. You don't have to worry about whether or not someone is washing their hands properly anymore. It's guaranteed every time. Well, now it's here's this massive whiteboard of crap that I need to get done or, long-term goals and tasks. And I can remove that off of there, right? Now I know hand washing is done because, even when we see the turnover within the food industry and training around hand washing. Like what's the time savings if we don't have to do that training and then know that basically the training's not going to work, right? And that people are, just every time the CDC does research on this, people just simply don't wash their hands properly. So automation and we've got so many interesting tools now, through technology to be able to automate these things so that we don't have to spend that mental burn to figure out how to solve this problem, which then frees up, like you said, this time to think and to plan and to think, well, what is possible here? Because I've removed these certain tasks off of my list.
And psychologically, you're fighting against a lot of different parameters. And this is, in the food industry, this is something that is very strongly embedded. And you referenced this earlier, Austin, is we're highly resistant to change in this industry. Highly resistant to change. As you mentioned, right, we see this phrase, well, it's always worked before, or, well, we haven't had a recall, therefore everything is working. No, those don't correlate. Part of this as well is, okay, Brian, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to look at things and start figuring out ways to free up time so I can be creative and think about ways to improve. There's also part of your brain which is saying, if I don't look busy, my boss is going to wonder if I'm needed. So there's part of that, I'm working, right?
Busy.
I'm busy. You look at me, look how busy I am. You need me here. Oh, do you need me here? No, you have to step out on that limb. And that's not in quality and food safety where our value lies. And I had a lab manager at one of my past companies, Austin, that whenever there was somebody called in sick or somebody went on vacation, she would then step in and take over the technician's job. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? It's like, well, I have to do this because I'm like, well, what about all the things that aren't getting done as lab manager while you're doing this? Well, yeah, I'll take care of that later. I'm like, don't do this. We'll find a temp. We'll find something else. All I have when you do this is an expensive lab technician. It's not why you're here. And she's like, oh, right. And you could kind of see the burden coming off her shoulders. We'll figure this out. That's not your purpose here. And we have to understand that piece. It's really important. We have a unique advantage in what we do in quality and food safety is we get to kind of step back, Austin, and look at the big picture, just like you do when you go and visit your clients, is we get to look at everything from 30,000 feet, which is why I end the chat, right? Another ritual with that summary piece is every plant is the same. Receiving, processing, packaging, warehouse. You bring some stuff in, you make some changes to it, you package that stuff up, and you ship it out the door. That's it. Everything else supports that process. How do you fit in? Quality, we're playing with everything in that process. And we get to then ask why. And that's our value that we bring to the organization. And part of that then is getting out of our technical box and learning how to explain this in the language of upper management and learning what I call speaking senior management. And this applies to the plant manager, your other managers within that, and then everybody up above that as well. And part of this is stepping outside that box and figuring out ways other groups in the organization get recognition for their activity. So a prime example for me is sales. Everybody complains because if Austin, you go out and you work with a client and you get a big new contract and they sign a nice check and you get to install new boot washers and hand washers and all kinds of stuff, easy to see, right? And everybody goes, yes, good job, Austin, yay, right? And everybody celebrates. Quality, as Duncan was talking about her earlier, is a negative. We are preventing things from happening. And that's hard to see. So what are different ways that you can figure out in the organization, ways to make that visible? And doing it in senior management speak, doing it in terms of dollars and cents. As I was referencing earlier with Bon Grand, the plant manager is going to get that cost of non-quality calculation right away, because he's going to see how that impacts his efficiency.
Right.
Now you're talking their language.
Yeah, and I mean, when I was, previously doing, learning design, not just for the food industry, but for multiple different industries, I designed a anti-harassment training program. And this was the same type of problem, is that if your anti-harassment training program is efficient, you aren't getting sexual harassment. And so you measure something that never happened. And so I spent some time on that front, actually developing a calculator based on, data that we have out there of, instances of, when it happens versus the lawsuits that happen, how much the lawsuit costs, and then also probability, right? We know statistically that harassment charges happen, at this percentage. I can't remember it now. And so if we have a company of 4,000 people, we know that we're going to get X amount of claims per year, and that out of those claims, X amount are going to turn into an actual lawsuit. And so it could actually plug this information in, and that's something I would love to do for the food industry at some point. The downside is that, we've talked about this before, is that the reporting and publicly available data sucks within the food industry, right? When it comes to sexual harassment charges, right? That's overseen by the EOC. That's, now we have an actual government agency who's collecting that data and able to look at it. And we've talked about this as well with oh man, what is the agency, the
OSHA?
the plane crashes?
So the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB.
NTSB. So NTSB, same thing. They're able to gather that data. And unfortunately, in the food industry, all of this is kind of behind a black curtain of, how much did this recall cost? How large was it actually? What were the legal fees associated with it? So that makes our job a little trickier. And so we have to work in hypotheticals a lot of the time. But I mean, there is, a decent amount of information out there showing what these recalls cost. So yeah, I think I've said this before. If anybody has an idea of how to create some type of calculator like that, so that we can actually just plug in, here's the amount of employees we have, here's how many sites we have, something like that, we'd love to be able to create something like that for the industry, so that it makes the job of quality and safety easier to take this to management and say, here's our financial risk that we're looking at right now based on the existing data. But otherwise, we consistently work with, what we have at our disposal, which usually isn't a whole lot.
Yeah. So the way I look at this is, good. There's an orange. I thought I fixed it. So part of this is, I think a couple of thoughts around that, Austin, is, do recall, not having a recall, does that need to be in your KPIs and your annual objectives? Yes, absolutely. Should that also be in other departments' objectives? Yes, absolutely. And we don't do that. That's one of the things when I go out and do risk assessments that I ask other departments. All of these other departments impact the potential for a recall. If procurement buys from a shady supplier and doesn't tell QA, they're directly involved. That negative aspect needs to be involved in there. Part of the challenge here that we're seeing is that we need to have upstream stuff as well, and that's why the cost of non-quality reporting was so important. So for example, we do have benchmarks out there. So we know Six Sigma, right? What's the Six Sigma defect label? Around five complaints per million or what have you. You can benchmark against that. Where are you relative to that? You can look at the industry itself and do some sleuthing around to figure out what a standardized complaint rate may be for your product category. And then if you beat that, now you've got something you can crow about. You're helping your consumers. All of these aspects are super important. What are those different things that you can put in place? So for example, if you're able to reject a defective material at receipt, how much would it have cost the company if you would have produced that and had out-of-spec product? You can calculate those things. You need to make the difficult to see visible, and you need to do it in terms of dollar, because that's what senior management understands, dollars.
Yeah. I mean, that, I'm constantly putting together ROIs on, our equipment. It's like, here's what you're spending now. Here's what you would spend with our equipment. And that's typically the most common resource that's going to get kicked up the chain to leadership. It's not going to be all the other, sales presentation stuff that I've done, or, talking about, overall efficacy and things like that. Like, those are kind of secondary to, like, well, what's it going to cost us, or what is it going to save us? Either in time, chemical, water, but like you said, looking at the overall lower risk. And there was something else I was going to mention about that. It'll come back to me.
Well, yeah. So part of this as well is, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is you need to think in terms of preventing things from happening in the future, but also correcting things from the past. So what do I mean by that? Is, let's say, for example, in the past, before you got to this company, they purchased a god-awful piece of equipment that requires just incredible amounts of cleaning activity to maintain this piece of equipment. Okay. Can you benchmark that against what a standardized cleaning would be? So if it takes 10 hours to clean this piece of equipment, and normally it should only take 5 hours, you can now show a lost cost of revenue. You can't manufacture until that equipment is clean. You've lost five hours of production, and all the labor and chemicals and everything with that. You can show that to the organization. Now you can also use that information for an ROI, for a replacement for that equipment based upon that service time at 5 hours. So now you can make the process more efficient, and you are now showing the organization how to operate better, which we need to do.
That's why when we talk about this idea of food safety culture, the idea of it starting at the top, right, is because so many decisions are made in departments that don't even walk out onto the floor, right? It's like, HR is making decisions on what, who they're hiring, right? And that decision-making process of who they hire can greatly affect quality and safety. Whether how procurement is buying machinery, or how they're buying the equipment, the ingredients that are going into it. I mean, and so that's that holistic, full scope of like true food safety culture, which is that all of these departments realize that, and you've talked about this in the past, that like having specific metrics tied to safety or quality, for people in finance, right? Because I see this a lot as well. Many of the companies I worked with in the past, it was around mergers and acquisition. And, you talk about buying a crappy piece of machinery, but they'll buy crappy companies. And, now it's like, well, now we've got this thing. Oh, we got a great deal on it. But man, like the renovation on this rusted out hunk of junk is going to really cost us a lot, and has now increased our risk greatly.
Yes. Good analogy. And think about this in terms of your personal life. You need to buy a car, and you do your research, and you're like, all right, what's the reputation for reliability for the different brands? What type of vehicle is going to best suit me for where I live? And you look at all these different elements. You just don't go to a used car dealer and go, what's your cheapest car? Okay. Yeah. All right. The sales guy.
And then you've got like $1,000 that you saved.
Yeah.
But
you're going to have problems.
Company like a 16-year-old looking to...
God, I hope not. But yeah, every different department, to reiterate your point, Austin, is they look at it from their viewpoint. The engineering group is speccing that piece of equipment based on line dimension, fill rates, flow, engineering stuff, not cleanability, food safety, etc. You need to stick your nose in and get involved with that. And the more you can demonstrate how you can save the company money by doing these things right the first time, that's why you're there.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, cleanability, that's a huge one. I see that come up a lot walking facilities, and I'm in a position to kind of, be the new eyes out there. And I'm like, what's up with this right here? I don't know your production process. And there's many times where I see people kind of like roll their eyes and they're like, oh, we don't talk about that. It's something that I inherited and I don't know how to fix it. And a lot of times it can be around cleanability, because you'll see something and it's like, I'm not an expert on this machine, but that looks off to me.
Yeah. Working for French companies, they were very good at visualization. And this is how my boss explained that to me. He said, you've started at Groupe Lactalis, and you look out and there's this beautiful green field in front of you. And you start walking. And all of a sudden you trip right on your face. And you're like, ugh. And then you get up and you start pulling the grass back. And there's a skeleton there. And you're like, ah. So you dig up the skeleton, you throw it away, and then you keep walking. It's like, you don't know what's there. Was his overall point. You have to walk around and find them. You have to actively look and then remove them. If you don't remove them, somebody else is going to trip on them, right? And that was a fantastic way to visualize that. I love that story. Yep. So that was always a good one. Another thing that we were talking about when we were prepping here for the chat was looking outside of our industry. So the example we were batting around on Monday was air travel, right? We travel a lot. There are people who travel who don't travel a lot, right? They travel once a year or less. And TSA and the airports are constantly looking at their process to set it up so that people can navigate that with no training. So the easiest example is when you leave the airport, everything is set up with gates and guard. Once you reach a certain point, that's it, right? And everything is funneled and there's directions and you can follow it. And once you leave the airport, that's it. Right? You can't get back in. You can't even get back on the plane. They always warn you, don't leave anything, right? Once you're off the plane, it's ours, right? And you're never gonna see it again. And you'll see people who don't quite understand that. It's like, oh, I need to get back on the plane. I forgot my phone. Well, what seat were we in? Oh, I'm not quite sure where it is. Can I just go on it? No. Okay. No. They will go find it for you.
The horror story I have about that was coming back from London to do some video production out there for a client, and was jet lagged and not thinking. Got off the plane, got over to customs, realized I had left $30,000 worth of camera gear in the overhead and the plane. And of course you cannot get back on the plane. And so it literally took hours for them to track down that box of camera gear. Never again. I learned that lesson the hard way.
Oh man. Part of it too is introducing, as we've been talking here on the chat, is routine. If you've ever been overseas, and you see this in Japan, is my wife and I were on vacation in Tokyo, and we're looking out the hotel window down at the ground, and in the distance there was a construction project, and I can see the workers arriving and they got their bright yellow outfits on. Then all of a sudden they get in a giant circle, and I'm like, what are they doing? And then they all start doing this. And I'm like, oh, they're exercising. That is too cool. And they would stretch. And then the leader went to the middle of the group and he had a clipboard and he was going over stuff, and then they went on. They did that every day we were there, every single time. It was part of their routine. Are they stretching to improve safety? Yes. Is it going to make a big difference? Maybe, right? It may prevent a strain. It may prevent a back injury. Who knows? But it's got them thinking about it. And Gift Manager then used that opportunity to give everybody the game plan for that day. Fantastic. I love it. That ritual needs to be incorporated. We need to think in quality in terms of ritual as well.
Definitely. And I don't see as many like toolbox meetings as as I would like to, out on job sites. I mean, that morning check-in to talk about, it's, could be literally 3 to 5 minutes. It's just, what did we see yesterday that could be improved upon? Was there any, risks that we came across, areas for improvement, anything that you want to let us know? Cool. Okay, let's get to work. But then it, like you said, it becomes just this morning routine of like, and that kind of goes back to this element that I was really focused on for a long time around like creating like a speak up culture, right? So like how do we get people to bring these issues up before they become something much larger? And we see that as well with like, if you create that environment where people know that on a daily basis they can bring up issues, well, now it's not such a big deal when there is a finding, right? When there is, because, that whole idea of like 0 findings, I think is BS, it's like we need to be finding it because we know that there's pathogens in the facility. The goal is to find them and get rid of them. And so speaking up about that is critical, as opposed to like brushing it under the rug.
Yeah. And the most critical relationship in the plant is the supervisor and his team, bar none. That's where everything gets done. This is an opportunity for the supervisor to show that he cares about his team. Hey, everybody, how's everybody doing today? Everybody have a good weekend? Hey, how'd that softball game end up on Saturday? Who won that? Etc. It also allows him to check in with the team from a management standpoint. Does anybody look sick? Can I talk with them maybe after this group meeting? It's the perfect opportunity to give them a heads up on what's going on. And it gets to Sean's point where he's saying routine can be dangerous as an autopilot function as well. Pencil whipping, right? We fight this all the time in our industry. The startup checklist. Yeah, right? Did they really check those things? It's the opportunity for the supervisor to say, hey guys, we have a super busy day today. We got a big order that needs to get out. At the end of the shift, we need to make extra careful to clean everything because when we're really busy like this, we're going to be tired. So I'm going to be working with everybody to make sure we get everything clean for tomorrow and that everything is set up really good. Everybody got it, right? You're setting those expectations in advance, not just, hey, everybody get to work.
Right. Yeah. And there's not really a big opportunity for that type of like camaraderie. Once the wheels are in motion and you punch in and it's time to get going, like there's not a whole lot of time to stop and have that type of connection with the team.
Right. And now this is also an opportunity for competition. You see this on the operations side, right? You'll go into plants and they have the big TV set up with the line efficiencies. And you have different, here's shift 1, here's shifts 2, shift 2, come on. Quality needs to do that too. Hey, shift 1, 100% on your allergen testing at the end of the shift. Right? Good job, everybody. Good job cleaning. Shift 2, let's see if you can match that, right? Everybody, include those things, include those KPIs, include consumer complaint rates. Let the employees on the floor see that. That is the end result of their work. Tie them into that. Give them visibility. It's a complaint I see all the time is from the floor. Because we don't know what's going on in the company. We don't understand how we fit into this. We just do our work and then we go home.
Yeah. And you talked about the checklist and like kind of just like, blowing through the checklist and knocking stuff out. And this is something I've always been kind of interested about with pilots as well, is that I'm like, before they take off for every flight, they have that checklist. And I'm like, if you've been doing this checklist for 20, 30 years, how do you maintain authenticity around that, right? I mean, yes, it is a very critical job and there's so much at risk, but I mean, like anything else, when you do it for that long, I can see how that would just be like, dude, I know this, I know to do this and this, but it seems like that is a critical area that they really take very seriously. And so that would be an interesting area to research as well, and to find out like, how do they actually like maintain interest or compliance around doing that checklist every time? And maybe they don't. Just assume that they do.
Yeah. I think part of that, one of the things that they do, if anybody's got any additional comments on this, I definitely don't know a whole lot about this, but normally they don't team up the same pilot and co-pilot, right? They'll mix it up. Right? I can see too, right? Where if you have the same two people in the cockpit, where you could, kind of come to an understanding. Okay. Well, and part of it too, right, is they have that whole routine down as how long it should take, right? So if it takes the pilot and the co-pilot of the 737 MAX 20 minutes to complete their pre-flight checklist, and they get it done in 5, somebody's going to notice. Okay. So with that feedback mechanism of how long those things take, we can learn a lot from those other industries, which I think is part of our point. How can you look at these things to standardize that process? We know, because part of our theme around this is how to free up time if you're in QA and food safety. If you're spending your whole day out on the damn floor yelling at people and saying, wash your hands, and put that hairnet on right, and this checklist isn't done quite right. What an awful existence that is. I mean, you don't see that to continue that plane analogy. You don't see that in the plane. There's not a QA person on that plane standing behind the pilot and the co-pilot.
Yeah. It's, I think about the amount of times whenever I'm walking through a facility and just the amount of stuff that, the QA person sees, the amount of times I see them pointing at their ears for somebody to pull their hairnet onto the.
Yeah. And that's where that supervisor and his team is important. That's their responsibility to maintain those standards. Theirs. Joe reiterated my point. Thank you, Joe. Pilot with American said 25 years, he's only flown with the same first officer 10 times in 25 years. Isn't that crazy? Thank you, Joe. How can you, so those things that just drive us absolutely nuts in quality, how can you automate those? How can you look at pairing things up? Part of, I've often heard this before too, Austin, is part of the indicator of intelligence is the ability to take two disparate things and link them together. And we were talking about this on Monday. And so one of the things that people complain about a lot, and Meritech deals with this a ton, is hand washing, right? People don't wash their hands correctly. How can we get people to do this correctly? Well, we can automate the process, and we took that to the next level. How can we then tie this to what they're most interested in, which is their paycheck? How about if you have a biometric sign-in, and then that automatically goes into a gated area where you wash your hands, right? So you can directly link logging in for that shift with hand washing. I was thinking of, in that particular example, when you exit an airport, right? You can't go forward until you complete a step. How can you audit?
Yeah. And I love the idea of tying automation to money so that, because then it's like, we know that something has been done, like what we currently have is, the option for like turnstiles connected to the hand washer, right? So it's like you wash your hands, you have to leave it in there for the full 12 seconds. And that's the only way to unlock the turnstile. Which is for like high care areas. But to make it so that basically washing your hands is equivalent to clocking in, I'm like, that would be awesome. Because then it's also, like you said, just lumping these things together so that it's less things for the employee to think about, it's less things for you to think about, and that it's getting done right. And there's, God, we could do an entire, show just on like the different automation tools that are out there in the industry, because there's constantly new stuff coming out to make everyone's lives easier. But when I'm learning with the new Lafferty stuff is, just overall titration of chemistry, and we have technology to do that and make that as easy as possible. Making it so that people don't have to fill up a huge portable sanitizing station and then lug it across the plant to spray down equipment. It's like, well, you just have hose drops and, so there's tons of stuff out there that just makes life easier. And when it makes life easier, it reduces that risk.
Yes. So what we're talking about here is how can I free up time with shit that drives me nuts, get that off my plate so that I can spend my time thinking about how to make the plant better. Another example from my past, I was visiting one of my plants and I was doing kind of my walk around the outside of the plant. Garbage, I mean, like paper, like candy wrappers, soda bottles. I'm like, what the hell? Went into the plant, I was not happy. And I'm like, talk to the quality manager. I'm like, what is with this mess outside? This isn't normal for your plant. And then she said, well, yeah, we have some contractors doing some work. I'm like, and? Well, we all know how that goes. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to fix this. So here's what I did in the company from that point forward. I went to the maintenance team in that plant and said, where's your contract for your work on this project that they were working on? I said, okay, I read through it. I'm like, how come it doesn't have anything in here about compliance to GMPs? Well, that's not, this is for the job. Yeah, well, GMPs are the job. And so in future contracts, I built it in there that if we found violations of GMPs, trash, not wearing hairnets, not washing hands, there was a fine associated with each of those different items. And we would deduct from their invoice if they did those things. Want to guess how quick that went away?
Right.
I hit their pocketbook.
Yeah.
And the time, and we've talked about this on the chat before too, the time that we have leverage is before the contract is signed in QA, right? Oh, by the way, if you want to come do this nice, juicy product line packaging install in our plant, and you sign this contract, here's the requirements, right? Oh, yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Okay, good. Now I've got leverage.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's a great strategy too. I mean, the fact that they weren't adhering to GMPs is pretty shocking considering they're working in a food facility.
Well, and if you're in a plant in rural Wisconsin, who was the electrician working on that, right? He was building a house yesterday and installing the wiring, and now he's in your food plant. And the response, if you ask them, is, I'm an electrician. I don't know anything about this food stuff. I'm just here to put in the wiring. We've all been on job sites when homes are being built and we see what those look like, right? You don't want your plant looking that way. How can you do those things? AI, of course, right? How can AI automate? One of the things we're fantastic in this business is gathering data. How do we turn that into actual information?
Yeah, and I think there's so much that can be done on the AI front in this. Where do you want to start on that one? Because that's a big old rabbit hole.
Yeah. Things that were really hard to figure out in the past are getting easier. Hey, Grok, if I change suppliers for this particular ingredient, what are some of the risks I need to think about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the amazing thing about it is that it's pulling from essentially all of human knowledge and putting it all together. And like you said, helping us think of things that we hadn't thought of before. What I find really interesting about AI is that it's teaching me how to be more specific in my questions, right? Because how well you phrase your question is how well your data or your response is going to be and how accurate your response is going to be. And for me, I've always felt that, question asking is one of the greatest skills that we can have. And AI is really, I think, teaching people how to better ask and frame questions, because you can just ask it, what are the potential risks of, this particular ingredient of, sesame seeds, and it's going to give you a fairly generic answer. But then if you start getting more and more specific around, here's the product that I work with, here's how we distribute it, here's who's buying it, and you start to plug that in, then now it's going to give you a much more intelligent answer because it has the parameters that you're specifically looking for.
Yeah. So as the QA food safety manager, your most valuable asset in that company is your brain, right? And you have to have time to think of this stuff and evaluate it. Risk is constantly changing. We treat it as static. It is not. And we need to be looking at it that way. This is why we have these gigantic recalls, is because people weren't thinking about it. Oh, hey, is the non-fat dry milk supplier important for this infant formula we're making? Yeah, super, super important. Should I visit them? Probably a good idea. Some people need to think about these things and change over time. To your point with using AI. Hey, Grok, we make this product, hyper-specific detailing of that. We manufacture this, we do it in this location, we did it. And looking at the overall world market and the changing conditions for these commodities, what potential risks could be evaluated that I'm not thinking about, right? You're trying to find the dog not barking. To Duncan's point earlier, trying to find the negative. And that's really, really hard to do. And we were laughing as we were getting ready for the chat because I came up with an example of how we look at cost savings in the company. We don't drive to the grocery store and come back and say, that's fantastic. I didn't get in a wreck. I saved myself $10,000 by not getting in a wreck from the car going to the grocery store. No, that doesn't make any sense. You can't, people will look at you like you're crazy. Oh, really? You saved 10? Oh, congratulations. That's nonsense. It's nonsense. But those actions that we take to prevent that are real. The measurement is not. You need to figure out ways to make that real.
I see someone put that on their LinkedIn page, save company $240 billion because I basically calculated every day I saved them 10 million because we didn't have a recall.
Senior management's going to look at you like you're an idiot. And guess what? You kind of are. You mean? Now, you need to think about these things in terms of probability. Is Austin Welch, seasoned driver with a good driving record, have a lower probability of an accident versus a 15-year-old kid who just started driving? Yeah. Do our insurance rates reflect that? Yes. Right? Does moving that teenage driver more toward you improve safety? And is that a measurable savings? Yes. Getting it? How can you measure these things? Think outside the box, which I think is kind of our theme for today. We're running out of time here, Austin. So any closing thoughts you'd like to leave people with?
Man, the last thing that I'm thinking of is just like continue to look into what technology is available for, even simple problems. Like one of the coolest, simplest things I saw was I was at a tortilla facility, and when I walked up, there was all this commotion of these birds outside the facility, and it was like they were fighting. And I was like, this is crazy how loud this is. And I'm looking around, and I walk in, and I'm signing in, and I'm talking to the security officer. I'm like, what is going on out there with these birds? And he was like, oh, it's just a speaker that plays birds of prey sounds because we had a pigeon problem, and we couldn't get rid of the pigeons, so they just put this thing up that just plays the sound of hawks and solved their pigeon problem. And I was like, that is the simplest technology ever to solve what potentially could be an extremely expensive problem. I've been to factories before where they bring out falconry people to hunt down the birds, and then you got to clean up after them because they're still going to be out there. And I was like, man, what a brilliantly simple solution.
Right. And to bring that full circle, that was developed by somebody who had time to think about a correct solution instead of doing what's always been done. So I'm going to put her in the chat here as well. One of the things I've been talking about online, in case people didn't know about it, I am moving on to another phase in my life. I'm retiring from doing this, and so preparing for that. But we've gathered so much good information over the last 5 years here within this chat, and there's 6 chats left. We're going through early April. Joe is my last guest. Joe Leno is my last guest on the chat. And I've created a database of all of the chats, which has all of the information. And I'm like, I want to make this as available to everybody as I can. And it's going to continue being available as a resource so you can pull this information out. And I made that available online for everybody, and I'll put the link in here, for $10, right? $10 for access forever. So, a cup of coffee and your bagel at Starbucks. Because I think what my guest has said here on this chat is extremely important in helping people think about these things. So if you're interested at all, please check that out. It's really cool, and it's going to be up there. I'm going to continue maintaining that after I move on to my next phase, and it'll be out there for everybody to use. So hopefully everybody will take advantage of that.
Awesome.
And with that, guys, we're going to close our chat. Thank you, Austin. Great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, man. This is a really interesting one.
Yeah. And part of this as well, too, is the people who are attending, thank you, because you're demonstrating willingness to learn and think. And that's key to success in what we do. So I applaud all of you for being here and the incredible contributions with the group as well. So with that, we're going to close out our chat for this week. In the meantime, have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy yourselves. And of course, we'll be back here for a little while next Friday at the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we'll all bring on another guest like Austin to share all kinds of cool information. So have a great time, everybody, and we'll see you then. Have a good one, Austin.
All right. Have a good weekend.